In the print Intro-27 in your packet, we're going to learn how to use patterns. In this particular print, we have two parts that are identical, and each part has a grid pattern of 25 holes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one hole, the bottom left hole of the left part, and then we're going to pattern that hole into the grid pattern, and then take that entire group of patterns and pattern it to the left, or to the right 5 inches to create the second part. So what we want to do first is create a new program. So from the input screen, we go to Program Manager, New, Conversational Program. And that creates a new program in the list. We then go back to the input screen. We want to set up some stock geometry. So we're going to set up the stock as if it were just one of the two parts, so the left part. So we go to Part Setup, More, Stock Geometry. We say yes. We want to manually size the stock. It is a box, and we just put in the information. Looks like this is a 3" by 3" square block that is 0.38 in thickness. Now the bottom left corner of this part is 0, so there's no need to use the reference positions to move the stock into position. So we go back to the input screen, and we want to set up the two tools that are asked for on the print. Tool Review, Tool Setup. The first tool is going to be a center drill, 0.125 center drill. The length will be set up on the machine. We'll put a 60-degree angle. Maybe a tip diameter of 0.05. Set up a surface footage, chip load, and so forth. Now let's go to Tool 2 and set up the drill. It's a 1/4 inch drill, so 0.25. Also 400, and the same chip load. Now we have our tools described. Let's go back to the input screen, and let's begin to write our program. Part programming. This is going to be a holes block, and we're going to do a drilling operation using a center drill for operation 1. Put some values in here for the center drill, select the tool, go to the next hole operation. This will be a drill. Let's go through the part, 400 thousandths. No need to peck this drill. So we have now given it the two operations we need to do. A center drilling operation, followed by a drilling operation, and next we do a hole operation to tell it locations or where this hole is located. Bottom left corner of the part is 0, so we're going to be 0.5 positive in the X and up 0.5 positive in the Y. Go ahead and drill or graph this part, and we see we have one hole in the bottom left corner of the part. Let's go back to the program. Let's look at it in the review button, the review screen. We see we have one holes block. Now we want to take this holes block and pattern it in a rectangular or grid pattern. The rule with patterns is the pattern block must immediately come before whatever geometry you wish to pattern. All of the blocks that you would like to pattern would become immediately after. It could be 1 block, 2 blocks, an entire program. And at the end of the range of blocks that are getting patterned, you want to close out the pattern with a pattern end. So in this case, first we want to insert a block before the holes block. Insert block before. It's going to be a pattern, loop, rectangular. This allows me to tell how many parts in the X and in the Y, or just to determine the number of rows and columns. We have 5 in the X, 5 in the Y, and they are a half inch apart in both directions. If we go back to the input screen, or excuse me, the review screen, you see that we now have block 1 as a pattern, and it gives what type of pattern it is. All geometry following this, in this case the holes block, will be patterned in that manner. Once we have created the final piece of geometry in the pattern, we then want to close out the pattern with the pattern end. Now you see that block 1 is the pattern, block 2 is the geometry within the pattern, and we close the pattern out with an end. If I now draw this, you'll see that I have a grid pattern of 25 holes. Now we want to take this piece of geometry, this entire group of geometry, and pattern it to the right for the second part. We're able to nest patterns. In this case, we want to take blocks 1, 2, and 3 and include them in a pattern of their own. So we're going to highlight the block 1. We're going to insert a block before. It's also going to be a pattern. This time it'll be a loop linear. There are two patterns in this, or two features in this pattern. You always include the original part. They're 5 inches apart in the X in the positive direction, and there's no movement in the Y whatsoever. So now this pattern will begin, and we'll pattern everything after it, which would include the rectangular pattern that we included before. For every pattern, there must be a pattern end. So I go all the way to the end of the program, past the last pattern end, which was associated with the first pattern. I insert a block before, also a pattern, pattern end. Now you can see that blocks 1 and 5 are associated with the first pattern. You see block 2 and 4 are associated with the second pattern. And the only piece of geometry that we created in this program was the holes block. Now when I go to graphics and I hit the draw button, you'll see that it draws the first part. But the second part doesn't exist. The reason for this is the graphics screen will always zoom in on the original part only. When you set up stock geometry, graphics always zooms in on the first part. Zooming out in the manner that I just did should show me that part here to the right. However, if I go to graphics settings, I'm only showing solids. If I were to show toolpath or show all, which is a combination of toolpath and solids, you'll see that I will get to see that other piece of geometry. I showed it to you in this manner only to prove that, or to show you that stock geometry does not pattern. There is no way for us to draw one small piece of stock and have that pattern with the geometry. So in this case, anything that was off of the solid model itself, when we were set to show solids only, wasn't displayed. Another way that you can take care of this problem is under the part setup, and where our stock geometry, simply say no. I don't want to manually size my stock. This will force the control to create a piece of geometry just a little bit bigger than everything that you're trying to program, and would include both parts in that. This is not an exact representation of what your part is going to look like, but it is one way to handle the fact that the stock is not patterned.